manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual although they are unreal, and therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental mode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma Pujita Kaitravota Paramo Nirmatsaranam Sitam Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu Shivadam Tapa Trayan Mulana Srimad Bhagavate Mahamani Pite Kim Vapurer Ishwaraha Sadyo Hridya Avarudyate Cha Kriti Bihi Susu Subhistakshana. Completely rejecting all all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for self-realization. What is the need for any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam sukamakad amrita dravya samyutam vibhata bhagavatam rasam alayanam muhur ahoratsika bhuvibhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of C. Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, Text 26. Maharaj Yudhishthira's inquiry. At Maharaj Yudhishthira's inquiry, Bhisma Deva first defined all the classifications of castes and orders of life in terms of the individual's qualifications. Then he systematically, in twofold divisions, described counteraction by detachment and interaction by attachment. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The conception of four castes and four orders of life, as planned by the Lord Himself, Bhagavad Gita 4.13, is to accelerate transcendental qualities of the individual person so that he may gradually realize his spiritual identity and thus act accordingly to get free from material bondage or conditional life. In almost all the Puranas, the subject matter is described in the same spirit, and so also in the Mahabharata. It is more elaborately described by Bhismadeva in the Santi Parva, beginning from the 16th chapter. The Varnashrama Dharma is prescribed for the civilized human being just to train him to successfully terminate human life. Self-realization is distinguished from the life of the lower animals engaged in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. Bhismadeva advised for all human beings 9 qualifications. Not to become angry, not to lie, to equally distribute wealth, to forgive, to beget children only by one's legitimate wife, to be pure in mind and hygienic in body, not to be inimical toward anyone, to be simple, and to support servants or subordinates. One cannot be called a civilized person without acquiring the above-mentioned preliminary qualifications. Besides these, the brahmanas, the intelligent man, the administrative man, the mercantile community, and the laborer class must acquire special qualities in terms of occupational duties mentioned in all the Vedic scriptures. For the intelligent men, controlling the senses, the most essential qualification. It is the basis of morality. Sex indulgence, even with a legitimate wife, must also be controlled, and thereby family control will automatically follow. An intelligent man abuses his great qualifications if he does not follow the Vedic way of life. This means he must seriously make a study of the Vedic literatures, especially of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. For learning Vedic knowledge, one must approach a person who is 100% engaged in devotional service. He must not do things which are forbidden in the Shastras. A person cannot be a teacher if he drinks or smokes. In the modern system of education, the teacher's academic qualification is taken into consideration without evaluation of his moral life. Therefore, the result of education is misuse of high intelligence in so many ways. The Kshatriya, the member of the administrative class, is especially advised to give charity and not to accept charity in any circumstances. Modern administrators raise subscriptions for some political functions, but never give charity to the citizens in any state function. It is just the reverse in the injunctions of the Shastras. The administrative class must be well versed in the Shastras, but must not take to the profession of teachers. The administrators should never pretend to become nonviolent and thereby go to hell. When Arjuna wanted to become a nonviolent coward on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he was severely chastised by Lord Krishna. The Lord degraded Arjuna at that time to the status of an uncivilized man for his avowed acceptance of the cult of nonviolence. The administrative class must be personally trained in military education. Cowards should not be elevated to the presidential throne by dint of numerical votes only. The monarchs were all chivalrous personalities, and therefore monarchy should be maintained, provided the monarch is regularly trained in the occupational duties of a king. In fighting the king or the president, the king or the president should never return home without being hurt by the enemy. The so-called king of today never visits the warfield. He is very much expert in artificially encouraging the fighting strength in the hope of false national prestige. As soon as the administrative class is turned into a gang of mercantile and laborer men, the whole machinery of government becomes polluted. Okay, so this is a long purport, so we'll stop right there and discuss some of the points. Yeah, in this verse, it says, then he systematically, in twofold divisions, described counteraction by detachment and interaction by attachment. So that's interesting. I guess he didn't cover that yet in the purport. Anyway, let's discuss the points that we read. The whole purpose of the Varnashram system, Chaturvanya Maya system, Gunakarma Vibhagasa, so it says that Krishna established the 4 orders, social orders, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, based on quality and work, not based on birth. And the whole purpose of this Varnashram system is to train people to be qualified to successfully terminate human life. In other words, to be Krishna conscious by the time they come to the point of leaving the body. And the ability to become self-realized is what distinguishes a human being from an animal. Because animals just eat, sleep, mate, and defend. A human being has the possibility of becoming self-realized. And Bhismadev recommended these 9 principles to become a qualified human being. So first is not to become angry, not to lie, to equally distribute wealth, to forgive, to beget children only by one's legitimate wife, to be pure in mind and hygiene in body, not to be inimical toward anyone, to be simple, to support servants and subordinates. So he says you cannot be considered a civilized person unless you acquire these preliminary qualities. That means there's a lot more, but these are the preliminary ones to just be civilized. And then there are special qualities, special qualifications, according to which Varna one is situated in. And these are all explained, especially in the 18th chapter it's explained. However, above all this is controlling the senses. Without controlling the senses, one cannot develop these qualities. The senses, including the mind. And Prabhupada says, for the intelligent man, controlling the senses is the most essential qualification. It is the basis of morality. That's a big statement. In other words, controlling the senses is the basis of morality. And then, right after that, it says, sex indulgence, even if it's legitimate with the wife, must also be controlled. And thereby family control will automatically follow. So sometimes I've heard devotees say that, well, Prabhupada said there shouldn't be any illicit sex outside of marriage. But he didn't say anything about inside of marriage. That's not true. He's very here he's saying it right here, but he says it in many places. Even in Bhagavad Gita, let me see where he says that. The 14th chapter. 16th chapter, let's see. Yeah, he says, so, modern society enjoys sex life with contraceptive methods or more abominable methods to avoid the responsibility of children. He's talking about abortion. This is not in the transcendental quality, but is demoniac. If anyone, even if he is a householder, wants to make progress in spiritual life, he must control his sex life and should not beget a child without the purpose of serving Krishna. If he is able to beget children who will be in Krishna consciousness, one can produce hundreds of children, but without this capacity, one should not indulge only for sense pleasure. There it is, right there. And he says it in other places too. And he's condemning contraceptive methods or abortion. Yeah. So he's saying here that sex, even with a legitimate wife, must also be controlled, and thereby family control will automatically follow. An intelligent man abuses his great qualifications if he does not follow the Vedic way of life. There it is. This means he must seriously make a study of the Vedic literatures, especially of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. For learning Vedic knowledge, one must approach a person who is 100% engaged in devotional service. He must not do things which are forbidden in the Shastras. A person cannot be a teacher if he drinks or smokes. In a modern system of education, the teacher's academic qualification is taken into consideration without evaluation of his moral life. In other words, teachers must be, their moral life is also pertinent for them to be, let's say, a proper teacher. Simply because they have some academic qualification is not enough. And then because only their academic qualification taken into consideration and not their moral life, in the modern system of education, a teacher's academic qualification taken into consideration without evaluation of his moral life. Therefore, the result of education is misuse of high intelligence in so many ways. Yeah, so recently, I think I talked about this before, but recently there was a big controversy in the school that's in a predominantly Muslim community in the United States. And a teacher was appointed for a class of mostly Muslim kids who was a homosexual. And he was trying to teach them that it's okay to have two daddies or two mommies. And the kids told their parents, and the parents started a protest, with placards and everything. We don't want our kids to learn this nonsense. But it's mandated by the school district that they learn about homosexuality. Yeah. Yeah, it was in UK. I'm sorry. Well, not in the United States. It was in the UK. But in the United States, it's happening also. So it was a big controversy still going on. Yeah. So because of changing morality in the United States and Western countries, they want to teach these things to the young kids. But the Muslims are rejecting it. They say, we don't want our kids to learn this. For them, it's sinful. In fact, in Muslim countries, they'll take homosexuals up to like the 10th or 12th story of a building, and push them off, right? And they all cheer, Allahu Akbar. Of course, we don't think you should do that either, but they're very adamant about it. But I've lived in Muslim countries. There's a lot of homosexuality in Muslim countries. A lot, right? But they keep it somewhat subdued. And the reason is that poor, uneducated Muslim men are not able to get married easily. So then they just, hook up with other men. You see that a lot in more liberal Muslim countries like Lebanon and so forth. And in other Muslim countries, it's there also, but it's more subdued. You don't see it so much, like in Egypt and other places like that. Okay, so the result of such education is misuse of high intelligence in so many ways. Okay. And then here, Prabhupada makes a big, strong case that the administrators should never pretend to become nonviolent and thereby go to hell. Well, he's talking about Gandhi right there. When Arjuna wanted to become a non-violent coward on the battlefield, etc., he was severely chastised by Lord Krishna. The Lord degraded Arjuna at that time to the status of an uncivilized man for his avowed acceptance of the cult of nonviolence. The administrative class must be personally trained in military education. Cowards should not be elevated to the presidential throne by dint of numerical votes only. The monarchs were all chivalrous personalities, and therefore monarchy should be maintained provided the monarch is regularly trained in the occupational duties of a king. In fighting, the king or the president should never return home without being hurt by the enemy. That means he was right in the front. The so-called king of today never visits the warfield. He is very much expert in artificially encouraging the fighting strength in the hope of false national prestige. As soon as the administrative class is turned into a gang of mercantile and laborer men, the whole machinery of government becomes polluted. That's the case today. So previously, the kings would be in the front line, leading the soldiers, and the famous pictures of them is like the king is on a very, let's say, prominent horse, and he has a sword, and he's the first to go and lead his men, and the men follow him. They're all, pumped up with adrenaline because their monarch is in the front. So there have been many famous people like that who were regularly injured, but they would because they were right in the front line of attack. Of course, nowadays warfare has changed somewhat. You have rockets, you have missiles, you have all these things, bombs, you have tanks. But previously, the king was on a horse and he had a sword, and he'd say charge, and he'd be right in the front. Okay, so we don't want cowards becoming leaders of society. And one example was Gandhi, because of his cowardice. So many hundreds of thousands, in fact, million people died because he was a coward. He gave in to the Muslims, and all kinds of violence broke out. Okay, thank you very much. We'll stop there. Are there any questions? Yeah. Yes. Yes. 50% to Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, 25% for a family, 25% for emergency. Right. So when the Brahmanas receive the money and the Vaishnavas, they distribute it to the common people. Because they know, who's deserving, because they live. What? No. Who are the administrators? Where are you looking at the word administrator?
No, this is like modern administrators raise subscriptions for some political people. Or the administrator should never pretend to become non-violent, thereby go to it. So, these are Kshatriyas.
Yeah. What did you say? Oh. Yeah, go ahead.
So you were talking about controlling the senses and also talk about an example of the UK. So then even with the Muslims, the Jews, or so everybody have their head free, right? Like where they could consult whether it's a community or leadership of the whole organization.
Yeah.
So they don't have such leadership where they get
Who?
thoroughly understand
Who doesn't have?
leadership of the people who are trying to protest, or the people who are trying to force this as a law, about homosexuality and those kind of education. So education team also have to be work with the leadership to understand for the community to guide.
Well, yeah, but see, there are lobbies, of people who try to influence the legislators in modern society. You have like the Congress of the United States. So they are legislators. They make laws. And then, so they're constantly being canvassed by lobbyists who represent different groups of people in the society. So the homosexual lobby is, in the United States, a powerful lobby. They have money, and they regularly are presenting their case to legislators, right? And they're fighting cases all the time to establish the legitimacy of homosexuality. So they succeeded in the United States and in other modern Western countries to convince the lawmakers to pass laws to protect them and to stop people from talking against them, right? So, again, in Canada, if you say something against homosexuals, you could get in trouble with the law. It wasn't like that before. Now they changed the law. So it just depends on the country and the leaders. And then it turns out that some of the presidents of the United States were homosexuals already. They kept it a secret.
Well, they give positive examples of the army and things like that.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the point that they will try to tell the students and others also, moral grounds, they are human beings. Sometimes it's disturbing to rationalize these things.
Well, look, the question, okay, if you want to have the Krishna conscious point of view, it's this. Whether you're a heterosexual or a homosexual or whatever, illicit sex is not allowed. That's it, in Krishna consciousness. So if two men want to live together, no one's going to protest. But if they insist on, publicizing their sex life, then that's or just like a man and woman, if they publicize their sex life, then that's considered sinful. So, two women can live together. Nobody's going to object to that. But if they live together on basis of illicit sex, so then it doesn't matter whether it's a man and woman, or it's two women, or two men, or whatever, or a man and a dog. It's illicit sex, and that is considered sinful. There it is. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And even other religions doesn't support.
Yeah, other religions have, like the Muslims say you can have 4 wives, right? And they also say the wife cannot refuse sex with her husband. Yeah, they say things like that. So therefore it becomes very complicated. But in Krishna consciousness, this is what if we were a leading society, this would be the principle. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.